I still feel some respect for those women who aided me in my time of debauchery. In any case, I freely took advantage of that liberation. I was even seen in a hotel dedicated to what is called sin, living at the same time with a mature prostitute and an unmarried girl of the best society. I played the gallant with the first and gave the second an opportunity to learn a few facts of life. Unfortunately, the prostitute had a most middle-class nature. She has since consented to write her memoirs for a confessional paper quite open to modern ideas. The girl, for her part, got married to satisfy her unbridled instincts and make use of her remarkable gifts. I'm not a little proud, likewise, to have been admitted as an equal at that time by a masculine guild too often reviled. But I'll not insist on that. You know that even very intelligent people glory in being able to empty one bottle more than the next man. I might ultimately have found peace and release in that happy dissipation, but there too I encountered an obstacle in myself. This time it was my liver, and a fatigue so dreadful that it hasn't yet left me. One plays at being immortal, and after a few weeks one doesn't even know whether or not one can hang on till the next day. The sole benefit of that experience, when I had given up my nocturnal exploits, was that life became less painful for me. The fatigue that was gnawing at my body had simultaneously eroded many raw points in me. Each excess decreases vitality, hence suffering. There is nothing frenzied about debauchery, contrary to what is thought. It is but a long sleep. You must have noticed that men who really suffer from jealousy have no more urgent desire than to go to bed with the woman they nevertheless think has betrayed them. Of course, they want to assure themselves once more that their dear treasure still belongs to them. They want to possess it, as the saying goes. But there is also the fact that immediately afterwards they are less jealous. Physical jealousy is a result of the imagination, at the same time as being a self-judgment. One attributes to the rival the nasty thoughts one had oneself in the same circumstances. Fortunately, excess of sensual satisfaction weakens both imagination and judgment. The suffering then lies dormant, as long as virility does. For the same reasons, adolescents lose their metaphysical unrest with their first mistress. And certain marriages, which are merely formalised debauches, become the monotonous hearses of daring and invention. Yes, cher ami, bourgeois marriage has put our country into slippers and will soon lead it to the gates of death. I'm exaggerating? No, but I am straying from the subject. I merely wanted to tell you the advantage I derived from those months of orgy. I lived in a sort of fog, in which the laughter became so muffled that eventually I ceased to notice it. The indifference that already filled so much of me now encountered no resistance and extended its sclerosis. No more emotions, an even temper, or rather no temper at all. Tubercular lungs are cured by drying up and gradually asphyxiate their happy owner. So it was with me as I peacefully died of my cure. I was still living on my work, although my reputation was seriously damaged by my flights of language and the regular exercise of my profession compromised by the disorder of my life. It's noteworthy, however, that I aroused less resentment by my nocturnal excesses than by my verbal provocations. The references, purely verbal, that I often made to God in my speeches before the court awakened distrust in my clients. They probably feared that heaven could not represent their interests as well as a lawyer invincible in the code of law. Whence it was but a step to conclude that I invoked the divinity in proportion to my ignorance. My clients took that step and became scarce. Now and then I still argued a case. At times, even forgetting that I no longer believed in what I was saying, I was a good advocate. My own voice would lead me on, and I would follow it. Without really soaring, as I used to do, I at least got off the ground and did a little hedge hopping. Outside my profession, I saw but few people and painfully kept alive one or two exhausted liaisons. It even happened that I would spend purely friendly evenings without any element of desire. Yet with this difference that, resigned to boredom, I scarcely listened to what was being said. I became a little fatter and at last was able to believe that the crisis was over. Nothing remained but to grow older. One day, however, during a trip to which I was treating a friend, without telling her I was doing so to celebrate my cure, I was aboard an ocean liner, on the upper deck of course. Suddenly, far off at sea, I perceived a black speck on the steel grey ocean. I turned away at once and my heart began to beat wildly. When I forced myself to look back, the black speck had disappeared. I was on the point of shouting, of stupidly calling for help, when I saw it again. It was one of those bits of debris that ships leave behind them. Yet I had not been able to endure watching it, for I had thought at once of a drowning person. Then I realised calmly, just as you resign yourself to an idea the truth of which you have long known, that cry which had sounded over the Seine behind me years before had never ceased, carried by the river to the waters of the Channel, to travel throughout the world across the limitless expanse of the ocean, and that it had waited for me there until the day I encountered it. I realised likewise that it would continue to await me on seas and rivers, everywhere in short where lies the bitter water of my baptism. Here too, by the way, aren't we on the water? On this flat, monotonous, interminable water whose limits are indistinguishable from those of the land? Is it incredible that we shall ever reach Amsterdam? We shall never get out of this immense stoop of holy water? Listen, don't you hear the cries of invisible gulls? If they are crying in our direction, to what are they calling us? But they are the same gulls that were crying, that were already calling over the Atlantic the day I realised once and for all that I was not cured, that I was still cornered, and that I had to make do with it as best I could. Ended the glorious life, but ended also the frenzy and the convulsions. I had to submit and admit my guilt. I had to live in the little ease. To be sure, you're not familiar with that dungeon cell that was called the Little Ease in the Middle Ages. More often than not, one was forgotten there for life. That cell was distinguished from others by ingenious dimensions. It was not high enough to stand up in, nor yet wide enough to lie down in. One had to take on an awkward manner and live on the diagonal. Sleep was a collapse, and waking a squatting. Mon cher, there was genius, and I'm weighing my words, in that so simple invention. Every day through the unchanging constraint that stiffened his body, the condemned man learned that he was guilty, and that innocence consists in stretching joyously. Can you imagine a frequenter of summits and upper decks in that cell? What? One could live in that cell and still be innocent? Improbable. Highly improbable. Or else my reasoning would collapse. That innocence should be reduced to living hunchbacked, not for 1 second would I entertain such a hypothesis. Moreover, we cannot assert the innocence of anyone, whereas we can state with certainty the guilt of all. Every man testifies to the crime of all the others. That is my faith and my hope. Believe me, religions are on the wrong track at the moment they start to moralise and fulminate commandments. God is not needed to create guilt or to punish. Our fellow men suffice, aided by ourselves. You are speaking of the Last Judgment. Allow me to laugh respectfully. I shall wait for it resolutely, for I have known what is worse, the judgment of men. For them, no extenuating circumstances. Even the good intention is accounted a crime. Have you at least heard of the spitting cell, which a race of people recently thought up to prove itself the greatest on earth? A walled-up box in which the prisoner can stand without moving. The solid door that locks him in this cement shell stops at chin level. Hence only his face is visible, and every passing jailer spits copiously on it. The prisoner wedged in his cell cannot wipe his face, though he is allowed, it's true, to close his eyes. Well, that, monsieur, is a human invention. They didn't need God for that little masterpiece. So what? Well, God's sole usefulness would be to guarantee innocence. And I'm inclined to see religion rather as a huge laundering venture, as it was once, but briefly, for exactly 3 years. And it wasn't called religion. Since then, soap has been lacking. Our faces are dirty and we wipe one another's nose. All dunces, all punished. Let's all spit on one another and hurry to the little ease. Each tries to spit first, that's all. I'll tell you a big secret, monsieur. Don't wait for the Last Judgment. It takes place every day.